Hello and welcome, Janet Beckers here, and a big welcome to Romance Your Tribe Radio and my beautiful, beautiful guest, Jeanette Jifkins. Hi, Jeanette.
Hi, Jeannette. How are you going?
Good, good. Jeanette and I have just been hanging out like a bit of a reunion last week when we were at Jamie Shrenko's conference here down in Sydney, which, you know, always feels like a reunion because there's all these amazing people doing things in business that you only ever see everybody now and then. And we got to hang out quite a bit, which was really, really lovely. Yeah. And it's just so nice having somebody that is really immersed in the internet business world, but in a completely different way, because Jeanette's specialty is law, specifically for online businesses. And so talk about huge insights into the industry and things that often us as business owners who are operating online may take for granted or don't think are important, or on the flip side may go have terrible fears around things and they just absolutely stop you taking action. So it's really lovely to have someone like you, Jeanette, who's behind the scenes and knows the consequences of not doing things right and what things are important and what things aren't. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to go over the legal life cycle of a business and really learn here from Jeanette, like what things at what stage in your business are really, really important. So before we do that, Jeanette, I would just love to introduce you to everybody here. So, and a little bit about your story, because in law, there are so many different areas that you can go into. So what led to you specialising in online law?
Well, when I started my legal career, I was actually in litigation. So I was turning up to court, I was in dispute resolution, and I got to a point after about 5 or more years where I realised I was just banging people's heads together, and there are a lot better ways of doing things. Nobody wins in court except the lawyers, and I freely own to that. But there are other ways to help business people, and what I really wanted to do was to help business people. And in doing that, you know, you can do the same thing all the time and you can stay in private practice and work for other people. And I ended up moving into businesses. So I moved inside businesses as in-house counsel and learned really what it's like to run a business. So that gave me a whole different perspective on the way the world works. And at the same time, my husband's a computer programmer and he was doing all this stuff in the online space, and I was beginning to meet people in the online space. And a business colleague of ours said they really didn't understand what was happening online and they really would like to understand it better. So I started reading up and I found it really interesting. And the businesses, the people who are going online, it's a really fun space to play in. And you get exposed to this huge variety of business and unique ways of doing things and new ways of doing things. And you learn about all these different technologies. And it was just really fun. So in about 2010, I started actually really focusing what I was doing outside of my day job on understanding the online space. And I started setting up a legal advisory service for people doing business online. And it kind of grew from there. And it turned into eventually in 2015, Onyx Online Law became the full-time legal business that I now operate.
Right.
And, you know, we now have other legal staff and a growing team and growing up as a business ourselves. So it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah. And you know what? A few things that I picked up from what you were saying there, which for people who are listening, I think are really important lessons for you. When I'm looking at Jeanette's story in terms of her own personal business growth. So not necessarily looking at the legal stuff yet, but there were a couple of things that you did. And one of them was that, you know what, I identified that there was, first of all, that I liked working with businesses, but actually then went into businesses. So you got to really see what it was like. And I love that idea, because a lot of times people will go, oh, look, I'm really interested in this particular industry, but they never take an opportunity to immerse themselves into it. So they don't necessarily understand it. So their understanding of the issues facing there can be a little bit superficial, maybe from having one client with it, where they've thought, oh, I think I'll go down this track. So I think that's really admirable, and it's something for people, for dear listeners, to think to yourself, is there an opportunity for me to immerse myself in this industry a little bit more? And then I also love that part about seeing that particular niche and really immersing yourself in learning it. So that's that next stage that means that you just haven't said, oh, this is the business I'm going to go into. You've actually, evolved into it. And just that very last one, which for me is the clincher in any business, is she said it was fun. I mean, awesome. That's going to keep you going. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I just love the way that you charted the way to where you are now. It's it means for me, as from somebody who then is also, Jeanette's going to be helping me with an exciting project that I've got coming up, and when you're knowing that you're going to be working with somebody, you really want to do your due diligence. And a big part for me is not just what work have they done and who they've worked with, but also, are they going to be around for the long haul? Like, I'd like to build relationships that go for decades with suppliers, not just something that's a one-off. And a big part about that is, do they really enjoy what they're doing? Like, have they evolved there, rather than, I'm just thinking I'm going to target this niche for a while. So, because that's really, really common,
Yeah, and it's
niche choosing.
It's a huge amount of effort. From my perspective, that's a lot of effort that would have to go into, I'm just going to do this niche for a while.
Yeah, but you know what? I know this I can relate to this, because I had started going down niches that did not give me joy at all, simply because the numbers stacked up. Hello, how to convert your car to LPG gas. Who gives a toss? Who gives a toss? So, there's no way that I was ever going to stay in that industry for a while, even long enough to launch the program. But, that's, so that's the name. If you've ever been in that situation, don't beat yourself up about it. It's just part of evolving. But, really think about, sometimes you might look back at what you've been doing and thinking, oh, my path to here was 10 or 15 years. That's good. You're coming from a solid background. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for the insights into Jeanette, the businesswoman, behind Jeanette, the lawyer. So now let's look at the problem that people have got, which is when it comes to online business, you'll not only have the legal sides that go with just business in general, there's also the really specifics to online. And I find people tend to fall into two groups. They've either gone, oh, look, I need to know to protect myself. I'm really worried about so many things, and I'm worried that I'm going to be caught up in some legal issue that I'm not protected against. And it can be enough to stop people actually going online. And I actually, surprisingly, from a lot of the people I know, I don't think that's the majority, because I'll get a lot of those people, but they're not necessarily the majority, and they'll have a lot of fear stopping them. The other side, and my hand's up here a lot as well, is the entrepreneur who just get me out there, the optimistic sort of like, let's make this happen. We'll go, oh, look, we'll work out that legal stuff. I'm going to be fine, totally fine. Or I'll just go and look on as many websites as I can, copy, paste.
Oh, gosh.
Yes.
Please don't do that.
So I actually suspect that that's the majority of us. So what would be really good is, so if we were talking just before we came on about there's actually a life cycle, a legal life cycle online. So keeping in mind that, and I'll be really interested when you're listening, like which of those two camps do you fall into? I'd love to hear it. Just however it is that you're going to comment down below, send us a message, whatever it is, just share and let us know. I'd really like to know. So knowing that this is probably the two fields, the directions people are coming from, let's dive now into the 4 stages in the life cycle, and let's see if we can have a look to help people in both sort of camps, like things that they need to be aware of at each stage. So over to you, baby. So what's the first stage?
So the first stage is really setting up your startup phase. And exactly what you were saying, you've got the people who are consumed with fear and the people who just run with it. And there are risks and opportunities in both camps. So coincidentally, I've worked with 2 people in the sort of consulting advisory space, both with some health aspects to their service delivery in the last sort of 6 months.
Yeah, right.
And in those 2 different camps. So the first one is actually in a regulated health industry, so has a whole lot of compliance issues to deal with, and was terrified of the whole online aspect of doing business, but needed to be there because there was a demand. People wanted to be able to find her services and all of that sort of thing. So the way we worked with her was understanding the compliance. And I have a background in health in Australia, so I'm familiar with the national system. I've been on some regulatory boards at a national level. I have a really good understanding of health space in Australia. So I was able to work with her, and what we did is we did a complete review of her website. We tweaked some words here and there. We gave her a structure and some strategy on how to work forward with that. And we put in place all of the minimum compliance things that she needed in order to move forward with her business. So that fitted with her budget at that level. But we also gave her, some sort of where to go in the future. So if this happens in the business, here's some things that you can consider. And if this happens in the business and so on, so that she had a framework where she was comfortable with where she was at right now. She could launch what she was doing, and she knew where she was going and when she could come back to us in the future and sort of say, okay, move forward, here's what we need now. On the other end of the scale was the lady who just launched and coincidentally had no health qualifications whatsoever. So 30 years of experience, her own learning, her own training, all of these things, but no university qualifications, no specific things that she could rely on. And she just launched, and she made a whole lot of promises on her website, and it terrified me, to be honest.
Right.
Because I've seen clients sued and had to pay vast sums of money or go bankrupt or both because they've made promises that they can't then back up. And they've made them with good intentions.
Yeah.
And not knowing the risks. But, for example, a client made some representations about cancer and said they had a particular service which could help identify markers for cancer. And the Cancer Council discovered them and got very upset with them and reported them to the regulatory body, which then took them to court and sued them, which meant that they ended up with $300,000 worth of fines.
Ouch.
Because they believed in what they were selling, but they weren't able to produce, for the court's benefit, medical research reports that supported what they believed.
Right. So for the startups then, if we think about, for the startups,
if you're in a regulated industry, you need to be more careful.
Yeah. And so what would be the main things? Like, would they need to perhaps look at some regulation body that they've got and see?
That's a great place to start.
Yeah, right.
So if you've got a membership organisation that supports your industry, they usually have a huge volume of resources to help you move forward.
Right.
And if you're already paying membership, go and use those resources, for goodness sake, please, because they've done the work. And they normally work with legal firms. I work with a couple of different industry organisations as well, and we help create templates and all sorts of things for their members to use. So that's a great place to start.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And what if you're, like, I'm just looking back to when I started, and we're going back quite a while now, and my, I've got a degree, but nothing to do with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I, first of all, it started with me just interviewing the most successful women I could find. So I wasn't necessarily making promises because they were the experts. But when it then started to evolve into people saying, Jeannette, I want you to coach me. And then, Jeannette, can you share step by step how you got your results? Again, there's no regulation body. And I just kind of went, yeah, okay. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people listening that, are a similar thing, that they've kind of, you haven't gone and done a qualification, but you have got experience. You've got runs on the board. You've got results either for yourself, and then you've got results for other people, and then you can go forward. So what would, for that startup, what would be ways that you can protect yourself from examples such as you gave? So it may not be necessarily in health, where I can certainly see absolutely you can really come in. But if you're, say, more of a business to business, perhaps even, or you may be a life coach, so business to consumer.
Yeah. So in those situations where you're offering a service based on experience and based on past successes, the clearest, best thing you can do to protect yourself, particularly online, is just have a disclaimer. Right. So you will find, if you go into websites, often in the footer there is reference to a privacy policy or legals or terms and conditions or whatever. Put a link to a page that says disclaimer. And what the purpose of a disclaimer is, just fundamentally to let people know what you can do and what you can't do. And in that document, you can pull back on any promises. So what you're saying is, everything I tell you is based on my experience, but your results are going to depend on the actions that you take.
Yeah.
I can't promise that you'll get the same results I did. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know how you're applying the information that I'm giving you. So I'm giving you the information based on my experience, what worked for me. I'm not promising it'll work for you. I'm just sharing what I did.
That's great.
Yeah. So that's fundamentally what you're doing in a disclaimer. And you can do it. I'm all for people doing it in plain English, because we communicate with each other as human beings. And the purpose of a disclaimer is to remove an element of confusion from your customer. So imagine explaining what you're doing to your customer to ensure that they're not at all confused about promises you are making or are not making.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I love that whole keeping it simple in language that people can understand, because, that's like, for us, the link we have on our website is called legal blurbs, because really that's how I think of it, is legal blurbs. Yeah. And I love that really simple of, sometimes I've seen people that have put there going, I got these results and this is what I got. But for all I know, you're going to sit on your butt and do nothing. Like, they've actually used that kind of language.
And I love that. I think that's brilliant, because you're not, the whole purpose of a disclaimer is to demonstrate you're not aiming to mislead anyone. What you're aiming to do is share information with people from a really honest, authentic position. And exactly, you can't influence what somebody else does. You can do your best to help them, but you can't guarantee they're going to do what you ask them to do, even when you give them the best advice.
And so just one more thing on that startup, and it probably counts for everything else as well, is one of the questions that I get asked a lot from clients is when it comes to case studies and testimonials.
Yes.
And protecting yourself and making claims. So do you have some advice for people on that?
Yes. So definitely, if you're in a regulated industry, you need to go and check back on your industry compliance regime, and that's not necessarily legal. There are ethical obligations that overlay legal. So they're
right.
Legal trumps ethical in a court of law.
Right.
But in a membership organisation where people can kick you out of the membership organisation and you want that little badge to give you credibility, ethics is most important to an organisation like that.
Oh, that's a great distinction. I love that. That's good.
Well, as I say, I work with industry organisations, and you've got to be really clear for members as to where their responsibilities lie, because they have to be legally compliant, but they also have to understand that from an ethical position, this industry organisation is trying to hold you as a cut above the general riffraff.
Right.
So they're setting a framework for you. And what you need to do is go and look and see if they say they have any commentary around advertising, because a lot of industry organisations are very conscious of how people represent themselves to the public, and they will give you a framework and they will say, no, you can't do this. Or maybe you can do that, but there's certain ways you can do it. So again, the health industry is highly regulated.
Yeah.
In Australia, the health legislation says you cannot use testimonials. The legislation.
Yes. I know, it's crazy, and it really does impact a lot.
It does.
On marketing opportunities. For people who, I attract a lot of people who are in various health industries, as you do as well, Jeanette, and it's a big frustration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So that's a good one for people to know, especially for my Australian friends. Yeah. Testimonials in the health industry, you can't do it.
And if you get testimonials, so if you're talking about your own business and you get a testimonial from someone and you read it and go, oh, that's a bit over the top, that's probably a key indicator of what you should be using and what you shouldn't. If you think it's over the top when someone's talking about you and it's not just an ego thing, oh, that's, I couldn't possibly say that. If it is, oh, they've just gone to the extreme, don't use it. Yeah. Or edit it and ask for their permission to use the edited version. Because some people think they're being extra supportive by being over the top.
Yeah.
I have actually used a number of testimonials that way. I've gone back to people and said, would you mind if I edit it and use it in this way?
So that's another really good point, is with the editorials, with the testimonials, I always, as good manners, go back and say, oh, do you mind if I use this on my website? And here is the wording that I'm going to use when I do that. Is that a legal requirement for people to do that?
So it depends on whether it falls within misleading and deceptive conduct. So the key thing, there is actually something written in Australian legislation, again, which says you can only use testimonials from real people.
Yeah.
Scary that had to be written into legislation. Anyway.
That is ridiculously strict.
It is. And also in terms of testimonials, that you must have the authority of the person giving it to use it. So people might give you a testimonial, and one of the things that with terms and conditions on websites where people are getting them through websites, we usually say that we reserve the right to edit them for length, provided that we don't change the context.
Right.
So that's the key thing. You cannot change the context or the meaning of the testimonial. So if, for example, someone gave you a testimonial for a particular service and you just cut out the fact that it was for that service and just made it as if it was generally to the services that you're providing, or you finished that service so you cut that out so that it sounds like it applies to the service you're now offering.
Yeah.
That's actually, you can't do that. That is misleading and deceptive conduct.
That's interesting. And one more thing on the testimonials, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Is a really common one now is people may give you a testimonial, not necessarily saying, here is a testimonial, but they will be on, say, Facebook. And it will be a public post, like it's not just even to friends. It's something that's public and it's a comment. And they have put something that you go, whoa, how fantastic is that? Like, hey, I got this amazing result from this program that you did, or this opt-in, or this advice you gave. Now, with those, I'll always go back to people. I'll contact them and say, hey, I just love what you did. Is it all right for you if I take a screen grab of that and put it on my website? Is it okay with you if I just use those words? Again, because they've put it in a public forum, can you just screen grab it and use it? Like, do you have to then get permission because they've actually done that very publicly?
Okay, so there's a couple of different aspects to that, surprisingly. So one, the screen grab. If you're taking it, for example, from Facebook and you're putting it onto a website, you're potentially breaching Facebook terms and conditions.
Oh, right. Oops.
Because what Facebook terms and conditions say is that you warrant or you promise that everything you put on Facebook you have authority to put on. And by putting something on Facebook, you authorise every other Facebook user who has access to that to reshare it. But you have no authority to take it outside of the Facebook platform.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so if you want to take something from the Facebook platform and you want to put it on your website, then it is best to go back to the person and get their permission first. And again, if they've made a public comment, which you then want to leverage into your marketing, ideally you would get their permission to do that. And you can just do that on an email, but keep a record. And it's just good practice. It's, it's a better way of doing business because you're engaging people in your business. You're giving people credit for, sharing about you. And I just think it's a much better way of doing business. And from the legal perspective, it is better to have their permission to reuse that information. In theory, they own copyright in the comment they've made. It depends on how long it is. So if you reuse it without their permission, you could be breaching copyright. So it's not just a representation matter. That's why what I was saying about there being a whole lot of layers of different screen grab.
Oh, look, I've just I'd always ask permission anyway, but that's a really interesting one. So better not even to use the screen grabs.
Well, unless you have a system to demonstrate that you've got permission and you're doing it in an authorised way, and that's why Facebook says you've got no authority to take it out, because that is based on their terms and conditions. So their terms and conditions say that if you put it up there, you give permission to everyone within that platform to reuse. Yeah. But if you take it out of that platform, they have no control.
Yeah.
And that's why you have to go back to the person to get their permission to use it.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, that's good. Because the thing that I like about having a screen grab, and I'd always ask people permission anyway, is it's authentic. People can go, oh, that actually was real. She didn't just make that one up. So I like that idea. Okay, well, let's move along, because otherwise I could spend forever just talking to you about these sorts of things, because I get these questions all the time.
Yep.
So is that before we move on to the next stage, is there anything that we need to add in for the startups?
For the startups, okay, so the most important thing, particularly for the scaredy cats who are afraid of going into business because they don't know what they don't know. Yeah. The key thing is look at where you're making money and protect where you're making money.
Right.
Okay. Don't stress about everything. Just focus on, okay, what is making me money? And do I need to do anything to protect that? So, for example, if you're a consultant and you're offering consulting services, and one of the problems that you come up against is you charge people, say, a monthly rate for 4 months minimum, and after a month they say they just stop paying, but they still expect to get services or something like that.
Right.
If you've got a really clear terms of engagement for the way that you work with them or they work with you, you avoid those discussions, you avoid those issues, because it's really clear. Like, we had a conversation around installment agreements versus memberships and subscriptions and that kind of thing. If it's an installment agreement where it's a set price but you're allowing them to pay it over time, then you make it really clear up front that they have to pay the whole amount.
Yeah.
from the time they start, as opposed to getting halfway through and saying, actually, life got in the way and I need to go do other things. They still have an obligation to pay the balance.
Yeah.
So it's about protecting that income. Do what needs to be done to protect that income. Yeah. Everything else can wait. Yeah. And then you timetable every 3 to 6 months. Okay, where do I perceive that I have a problem or a potential risk that scares me? And what can I put in place now to protect that? Because I'm ready to take that next step.
Oh, I love it. That is brilliant advice. And, the example you just gave is a perfect one. Because that's not uncommon if you've given something. That's why I don't do 12-month payment plans anymore for something, because people very often are finished implementing within 6 months and then they're going, why am I getting paid for this? Oh, it's a membership I don't use anymore. I'll just let them know. I just want to cancel my membership, and then you have to go back. That's not a membership. So it is a confusion. So and it's great to be able to go say, here you go. That's where you agreed that it was a payment plan. So honour your commitment. Yeah, really great one. Thank you so much, Jeanette. That's great advice. Look where you're making the money from. What can you do to protect that? Love it. All right. So the next stage.
So the next stage is business consolidation. So particularly as a startup, you might be trying this and that and the other to try and, see where you're going to get traction, how you're going to move forward, what you're going to do next. And then you get to a point where you go, okay, this works, that doesn't. I'm going to continue with that. I'm not going to continue with that. I saw one of the groups that I'm involved in, actually Superfast Business, there was a forum post from someone who had trialled something. They'd invested a certain amount of money. They trialled it for 3 months and they went, actually, that's just not making the return I need, so I'm going to can it. You get to a point where you're consolidating your business. So what you need to do at that point is you go, okay, what are the relationships that I have in the business now that I need to keep building? So that might be, at this point, you might decide maybe I want some premises, whether they're, in a co-working space or a startup space like Fish Burners or something like that. I want to go into one of these spaces. What type of agreement, what relationship am I going to create in doing that? And that's where you suddenly come up against documentation. So I've got a license to use this space, which means it's not exclusive. I can access this area, but I can't keep other people out of it. Or I have a lease of this space, which is exclusive, which means I can keep other people out. Or I'm going into a joint venture with someone and we're going to commit to doing XYZ in order to reach this objective, and we're making that commitment for at least 12 months. All these sorts of things are consolidating your business, bringing it together. And if you don't have some sort of process about how do I measure and how do I check that this is working the way I intended it to work, and do I know what my ongoing obligation is going to be? So, for example, you sign up for premises. Leases are 3 to 5 years in a lot of cases. That's a big commitment.
Yeah.
If you're looking at that kind of commitment, for goodness sake, get it reviewed, because that could be 20 grand a year for 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's not, leases are not things that are easy to get out of. Yeah. That commitment can be, even if you decide you want to get out of the premises, you may still have to pay that commitment until they get someone else in.
Yeah. Look, that's such great advice. I mean, and for an online business, that may not be one of the things that you're initially starting to think about, but you can be developing there. And, I just have a perfect scenario where a lovely friend of mine took up a lease. And because she got a really good deal, she took it for longer. That's what she did, and has since become exceptionally unwell. That she can't be in that business, but she's tied. It makes it very, very difficult to then also sell it. So that's great advice. That's great advice. And with people who are like an online business, when it comes to that consolidation phase, who may not be offline I really liked your advice there around joint ventures, because very often that's where you may go a lot as you're starting to grow.
Yeah.
And for that phase there, it's when it's really coming to businesses that are online. Is there anything else that they really need to be looking at this consolidation phase?
So at the consolidation phase, what you want to look at is if you're going into particularly working with someone else or even software, if you want to implement a particular system, is that a long-term thing you're looking at implementing, and how do you get out of it? So the getting out of it is really important. But in terms of particularly for going into a joint venture, if you're going to do that internationally, which is often the case for online business, be aware of the limitations in if anything goes wrong.
Yeah.
So, for example, we've done one recently for a company in the UK has gone into a joint venture agreement with a company in Canada. And we here in Australia put together the documentation to support that.
Truly international. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. It's that's what I say. It's a huge bundle of fun, what we do. But we had to take the parties through the fact that being in different countries, they are very, very similar laws because they're all based on Commonwealth law out of England. But Canada has developed. So they have different laws, they're in different jurisdictions, and we had to go through the whole process of if something goes wrong, what's our dispute resolution process so that it is not just cost effective for the parties but also effective in terms of resolving the dispute that they need to resolve. So in an international transaction like that, it's often geared toward arbitration. And what that means is you appoint a party, it's still expensive. You appoint a third-party arbiter, they look at the matter and they make a decision and you decide that's binding. But then you've got to then enforce a decision. And this is the thing. What you're doing in business is you're building relationships. And I had this conversation with someone this morning. Look at the relationships in your business, particularly in the consolidation phase.
Yeah.
And how do you protect those relationships? Because if you look after your relationships, you're less likely to have to go back to documentation and say, but this said, and you're not. And keeping communication, keep on the same page with people. The documentation is there because we all have failing memories. Very few people remember what happened last week. Yeah. So, 2 years down the track, 12 months down the track, you go into a deal, you want it documented so that you both remember.
Yeah, that's a great distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're referring back to that documentation because you're not happy, have the conversation first. Focus on the relationship, not the document.
That is brilliant.
Because it's the relationship that is going to take your business forward.
Yeah, that is such great advice. And if for people who are watching this on the video, if you saw me nodding when you were talking about international joint ventures and that it's expensive and it's difficult because it's different law, that was me, because the only 2 times when I've been burnt with joint ventures, they were in a different country, and one of them, the relationship wasn't that strong anyway. It was more an opportunity. So I wasted a lot of energy, and so did all the other people in the joint venture. Never saw the money. I was out of pocket, $10,000 up front, but then also travel and stuff, to be in this documentary that, anyway, really not very ethical people. But, there was nothing I could do. I just had to go, you know what? That sucked. That was a good lesson. Another one was there was a strong relationship. So for me, that was an incredible betrayal. And so it was very interesting, that going down that relationship mode, and where I thought, well, okay, it's not worth the few $1,000s that I'm out of pocket here, but the relationship, that's really, really sad. So that's a really good, but I've done so many joint ventures over the years, so many, and to have 2 that didn't work, that's pretty good odds. But
it is.
Overseas, be aware of that. So that's, really, really good advice, Jeanette. Isn't it funny? As we've been going through each of these, like obviously we're working through the stages that I'm at. I'm going, oh, yeah, I can feel that. I remember that. That was awful. Yeah, I should have known you back then. So let's now move to the next stage. What is the next one?
So the next one is scaling your business. So you're looking to grow, and this is actually where we're at the moment. So the kind of things that we're looking at in particular are systems, processes, intellectual property. How do we really look at the value of what we have in our business in order to leverage it?
Right.
So we're looking at making sure that we have our systems and our processes documented, because if you've got them documented, then you can share them with more people. And we're bringing in more staff now. And
right,
when it was a really small team and I could individually train the staff, that's fine.
Yeah.
But we can see that in the next 12 months, we're going to get to a point where me individually training staff is probably not the most benefit to the business. So if you document, and this is, again, we were talking about our friend James, what he does, he sets out standard operating procedures.
Yeah.
Creating that so that you have, it's basically you're creating your operations manual. And our business, what we're doing is we're actually setting up a wiki.
Right.
So our wiki will have everything you do in our business. And as we create more things, here's more processes on how to do it. And it's to ensure that we get, in terms of building your database, your online database, because we run a paperless office. So all of our information is online.
Yeah.
And it needs to be consolidated into project matters. So, or our legal files. And if, an email doesn't get filed, that's a problem. So we need to make sure there's a process to double check to make sure all of the emails get filed to the projects and that kind of thing. So it's sorting out your operating procedures. It's sorting out what your business looks like. If you had to show it to someone from outside, what would make them want to invest in your business? And this is why, I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of the banks that you deal with publish their own business plans, frameworks. So you can go to any bank website, and if you search business plan, you will find that they have their own template.
Right.
So if you think you want to borrow money in your business to reinvest back into the business to help scale the business, go to your bank's website, find their business plan, put your business plan in their format, because that is going to help you go and talk to them about them lending you money.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that is a great tip. You know what I just found really interesting about this thing here, because, again, like I've been going, yeah, that's our big thing here at the moment is our operations plan and changing the format, because the format we've had has become not working so well now that it's growing and we're going to the next stage. So it's that interesting. Like I'm sort of going, oh, yeah, okay, up to this stage. So this is interesting because I would always have put that thing of, putting all of your operations in a format that, your team can use and that, you can change, who's got access to it. For me, that would have fitted under the hat of like business operations, but I had never really thought of it falling also underneath the legal.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. Because if you think about it, because in scaling a business, what you're trying to do is create value. And for whatever future you want in that business, whether it is you think you might sell it in the future or you want investors to come into it or whatever your end game is going to be. I mean, for some people it's listing on the stock market or getting venture capital or whatever it is, whatever your end game is, that's how you demonstrate value in your business, because you're able to say to people, yeah, we can hand over our business as is. And particularly in online business, the online businesses that are low touch in terms of automated as possible, generating revenue, they're worth a lot of money because, people don't have to do a lot to keep them working. And they're worth more money if you explain to people exactly how they work and what your future plans would be if you kept it.
Excellent. You know what I love about this is when we talked about the startup, the focus was on protecting where you're making the money.
Yeah.
And as we've gone into the consolidation, it's very much protecting those relationships that are helping you to consolidate and build that strong business. Now we're looking at not just protecting what you're doing now, but forecasting on where you have got potential to be making money, and preparing yourself to be able to protect and present that.
Well, now we're protecting the whole of the business. We're protecting the thing that you've created, because in startup you don't really know what you're creating. You've got an idea and you're still learning. And in consolidation phase, you're getting rid of some of the chaff and you're really focusing on where the business is going and what you're going to achieve. Yeah. And in the scaling phase, you're going, okay, yes, this is working and we're going to ramp this up to add value. And so you're putting in place the things that protect that value in the business.
Excellent. Oh, I love it. Yeah. And so we're up to the next stage?
Well, also just in that stage, protect it, not just systems and procedures, but your intellectual property. So your systems and procedures are one aspect of your intellectual property, but you might have a brand that needs to be protected at that point. So you might want to look at trademark protection. I don't talk much about patents, mainly because they're very expensive to get and you need to have the money to enforce them to make them worthwhile.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. Very good distinction.
Yeah. So patents work where you've got pharmaceuticals, which are going to generate, vast sums of revenue for many, many years. They may not be worthwhile getting for something that doesn't have that scope.
Yeah. Good point.
It's worth, if you think you need a patent or you want a patent, it's worth talking to a patent attorney. But you need to understand, if you don't have the money to enforce the patent, you may have gone through that process, spent all that money and achieved that goal only to lose it because you're not enforcing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just on the trademark one, that's actually one of the ones that I have done. And it wasn't necessarily like I've got Wonderful Web everything. That brand we've kind of retired now. But Romance Your Tribe, I trademarked that years ago. Simply, not necessarily because it's like a patent and you're going after fighting it. But it was an important thing because I witnessed a client who they were using a brand that they'd made their whole website on, and then somebody else who had that, went to them and said, you've got to change this. They had to close the whole business and start rebrand again. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to be in that situation. It's like a defensive rather than like an aggressive sort of, patent holding. It was I'm just going to protect myself so I can say, I was here first, so no, you can't tell me to stop,
And that's interesting because it's different in every country.
Right.
So trademark protection is jurisdictionally limited. So you get trademark protection in Australia, it applies in Australia. You get it in the US, it applies in the US, unless you're dealing with Facebook and they just think that US applies everywhere.
Right.
I have small issues with that. If you get it in the UK, it applies in the UK, and the law is different. So in Australia, we can actually get a trademark 3 years before we start using it in business. But in the US, you can't. You have to demonstrate that you're already using it in business before you can get your trademark.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so you need to be aware of how it applies in the country where you are. But one of the very, very simple things you can do in the startup phase is do some Google searches and see who else is out there and what they're using, because even though they might be in another country now, with the scope of online, they could be here, wherever here is for you, next year.
Right. Great point. That's an excellent point.
And I've had that problem with a client. So we had a client who was sourcing a product from the UK, using the brand from the UK. It was trademarked in the UK. It wasn't trademarked in Australia. He was operating that business for 4 years. There was a different trademark holder, same trademark, same product, everything in the US. They came into the Australian market. and they registered the trademark here in the Australian market. And then 18 months after registering, they went after my client and said, "You're breaching our trademark." Now, there are technical legal rules which meant that he probably could have continued to use it. However, that would have meant 3 years and 150,000 in court and no certain answer. Because I tell people your chances in court are no better than 50-50, regardless of the strength of your case, for a whole lot of reasons.
Yeah.
So what we did with him was we sat down and we went, okay, where's the money in your business? And the money was not in the brand. The money was in the database. So we protected the database. We made sure that he could shift the database. We got him to rebrand his business, which did cost him 40 grand, but he spent $40,000 and we gave him 90 days, because 90 days is enough time for him to get the job done, but not enough time for them to not launch proceedings, So, it's a reasonable time frame. Yeah. So we negotiated that, and within the 90 days, he rebranded his business. It cost him 40 grand to rebrand. He kept his client base. He didn't lose any revenue at all through his business. He spoke with his supplier in the UK and they rebranded everything he was being supplied. Because of this, we negotiated the ability to sell what he already had branded and these sorts of things without having to make an account of profits. So we basically restructured his business in 90 days. We avoided going to court. He kept all of his revenue and he kept his business. And then they had demanded he hand over his domain name. We got them to buy his domain name.
Oh, good.
So then his legal fees were reduced because he recovered that money back in them buying the domain name.
Oh, I love it.
So, that's a different strategy for doing business, and that's part of your consolidation phase. If you think you're going to have a problem with a brand, then look at where the value is in the business. And if now is the time to rebrand, now is the time to rebrand.
I love it. The thing that I really love, again, is you have reinforced, where is the money in the business? What do I really need to protect rather than everything? I love it. That's such a great approach to anything in your business. Like, where is the money? Where do I protect? Where do I focus? That's brilliant. So we better move right along to this last one. This is just, you have just given the most amazing, this is a total masterclass. So let's move on to the very, very last one. And we'll just do that one very briefly. Yeah.
So the last phase is selling or exiting your business.
Yeah.
So you need to start thinking about what's your succession plan, what's your next step, because everybody runs out of energy at some point, I read John Paul Getty, and he died in the office at 84 years of age while he was still CEO of the company.
Bless his socks.
Yeah, exactly. So some people have the energy to continue their business indefinitely and they hang on to it for that period of time. But if you're not that person, what's your exit strategy? And how are you going to implement that? So you're getting ready for sale is not necessarily sale, it's getting ready for exit. And what you're doing is, if someone was going to purchase from me, what due diligence would they do? How would I value my business? Where are the loopholes in my business, or where are the untidy things in my business where if somebody looked at it, they'd ask questions? And so it's you going through your business from that perspective. You try and take the third party perspective and say, okay, I'm an outsider looking in. How do I make this the best, irresistible for someone else to want to buy? And you know what? Some people, they get to that point and they go, hey, actually, I've got a great business here, and it gives them a whole new lease on life.
That actually happens, to a girlfriend who's been a client, did the same thing. I'm going to start my passion business. I'm going to get this other business systemized so I can get a good sale and sell it. So she got it all systemized and everything perfect to sell it. And she went, this is actually really easy to run now. I can do both. So never sold it. So that's a great point. And so again, you're looking at where is the money, but in this time it's like, where is it that I can lose money in the sale? Like, what's going to make it so I can make the sale? So plugging those holes, those obvious things. Brilliant. Is there anything else at that point? See, we just nailed that one quickly. Is there anything that sale point, that last stage, the exit stage, that we should add?
I would just make sure, it's hard work, but go through and document your assets. Make sure you have your asset register, and the assets are all your online assets. So your domain name is an asset, your hosting is an asset, all of the software that you have access to, your integrations, all of that. What you've got to do is look at, if I changed business now, if I sold, what links break? You know, so you might have a subscription to a particular piece of software, or you have your hosting in a particular place, all of these sorts of things. What's going to happen to your business if that moves? Because you need to address those issues for the buyer.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's really, again, it's interesting. I've sold one business, my first business, and that was a really interesting process of making sure I had all of that, because they were going to move it to different hosting, different people were going to be doing things. And the other thing that I found was, I'm so pleased that I did beforehand, is because I was over that business by that time. That was my internet art gallery. Like, just take it, just get rid of it, but give me a lot of money first. But it was good because they weren't very organised, the people who took it over. So they were contacting, going, we need the login for this. And I went, remember, it's all on that one document. Every single thing is there. But I also put into our agreement that they could only contact me for help for 1 month.
Yeah.
After that was it. I didn't want to have a single thing to do with it. And it was really, really valuable to do, because there's a lot of people I know who've sold a business that almost end up consulting back to it unpaid.
Well, they do. Yeah. And you need very clear framework in your sale documentation to say, we will provide this kind of assistance. So I've done one recently where they've actually offered 18 months of support.
Right.
But that 18 months of support is limited to 2 hours per week maximum.
Excellent.
And it doesn't consolidate, it doesn't add up. It's 2 hours a week. If you didn't use it this week, it's expired. We'll give you up to 2 hours a week, and it's only on the phone. We're not coming in. We're not doing, we're not hands-on. We'll talk you through it. We might share screens, but that's it. That's the limit.
Yeah. That's brilliant. That's really good to know, because if you're like me, like you think I'm over this business, I just think, oh no, I don't even want to, I just want to remove this from my life. But that was just brilliant. Thank you so much for staying a little bit longer, and thank you everybody that has stuck with us for this point, because honestly, Jeanette, this has been like a total masterclass rather than just a simple intro podcast, which is brilliant, because you know what, as you can tell, like, Jeanette knows her shit. Really, you do. So there's a few things. I know Jeanette's going to be the person that's going to be helping me with, with a new revenue stream that I'm going to be bringing into my business, that I want to make sure that I'm protecting and setting up really well for all parties involved. So that, I'm absolutely confident that that's just going to work out really well. So Jeanette, there's 2 ways that people can help you. So there's one way where they can go and check you out. I know that you've got a checklist, and we're going to call it here romanceyourtribe.com/legal checklist, one word, legal checklist. So what will happen when they go there?
Okay, so when they go there, what they'll find is a PDF, and it gives you a whole string of questions. I can actually tell you how many. It gives you 15 questions, and you can also score yourself on those questions, and it looks at your online presence. So what you're doing is you're going through and you're answering questions relating to your online presence, and it gives you a score at the end, and it also gives you a rating. So if your score is 0 to 20, here's your rating, and here's what you might do with that. So yeah, it's a free download, and it's to help you just self-assess what you're doing in your website particularly, and it can help you identify where you might want to take some steps to protect what you're doing.
That's brilliant. And I love that idea, because you can just get an idea and go, oh, yeah, I need to fix this up. Like, I always find through any of those checklists, I get those ahas of, oh, so that's best practice just by the questions. So absolutely go there to romanceyourtribe.com/legal checklist. Now, also, you were telling me that you've got we won't go into exactly what's in it and the pricing or whatever, because this is going to be a masterclass that people will be referring back to for years. So it may very well change. But you've got a fantastic service that is, a really great intro price, that for people to be able to see where they're at that stage and what things that they, like a bit of an assessment. So can you just go into detail on that? Because that could be a first good first stage that people could come to you for.
Absolutely. So we've got a business legal lifestyle checklist. So what we do is we work with you through that, because as much as it's developed by a friend of mine, Jeremy Stratton, and he's tried very much to keep it plain English, but there are still some things that make much more sense to a lawyer than may make sense to a layperson.
Right.
So we will talk you through that on Zoom or over the phone or whatever. And at the end of that, it spits out a report, and the report tells you where you sit on the life cycle of a business. So those things we were just talking through, those 4 different stages, it shows you where you sit on those 4 stages. And it gives you a percentage of, in terms of a startup phase, here's all the things that you might want to put in place as a startup and what percentage of those things you've done. So
right.
if you're at a scaling stage and you've only done 20% of startup phase, there might be some things we can fix there. And it gives you a checklist at the end saying, here's some action items that you need to action.
Right.
And as part of that, because we're focused in the online space, particularly in that questionnaire is not, we'll also give you a report which says, here's your online relationships, and here's the kind of things that you can put in place to protect them. And also here's some costing around both, so that you have an idea in terms of forward planning. You can say, I want to implement this now, that I know I'm going to need in 6 months, and I know what kind of money I need to budget for it. So.
Yeah, I love that idea, because a lot of times I just assume that anything that I'm going to do with a lawyer is going to cost me tens of thousands of dollars. And from our discussion that we were having the other week, surprisingly, it's not necessarily going to be like that. So it's really nice to have a reality, like a true number of, okay, when you're ready to do this, this is what you've got to budget for, so that you know. So that is a great way for people to start. So where can people find you, Jeanette, so that they can talk to you about that or to get help with anything else?
Okay, great. So you can find me at onyxonlinelaw.com.
Yep.
And the best thing to do to get a quick response is to go to our contact page. So that's /contact-us. And on that page, it just asks you to give us your name, your website, and some details. And that makes it really easy for us to have a quick look at who you are, what you're doing, and then book in a conversation with you, or whatever it is that you want to achieve. We can step out and say, well, here's what you want to achieve. Here's the kind of cost it's going to cost you. Do you want us to get started? Do you want to timetable it into the future? What do you want to do with it now?
Yeah.
So that's the best way. So again, it's www.onyx, ONYX.
Yep.
onlinelaw.com, and just come to the Contact Us page and fill in that contact form, and we'll get back to you straight away.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So make sure you go and follow up with Jeanette. And what I also ask you to do is, as you can see, Jeanette has been incredibly generous with her advice, her knowledge, and it's, and for both of us, I know, like, Jeanette's incredibly passionate and thinks it's fun doing online law. And I'm incredibly passionate about helping people to just get out there and make the difference they're meant to do. So that's why we spend the time doing this for free for you.
Absolutely.
So one of the very best things that you can do, for number one, go over and join Jeanette's community. So go and get your checklist, get to know her. But importantly, what really is fantastic for us is give some feedback. So go over to Jeanette, if you go to the contact page, or just commenting down below wherever you're viewing this or listening, and just share, like, which of those stages are you at? And from what Jeanette was sharing there, what are some ahas that that's made you realize some things that you've got to change? And have you taken any action on that? Whether it's just one thing that you take action on today, come and share it with us, because it's just the most rewarding thing to know that you've actually listened and taken action. So that's our biggest ask of you, is go and do something with this and then come and share it with us, because that lights us up. So thank you so much again, Jeanette. You've been absolutely wonderful. I'll make sure that we've got links to everything that is there, and on the Romance Your Tribe website where this will be housed, I'll also put an article there that's got each stage, what are the things that Jeanette shared that you need to do at each of those stages, and some action points that you can be doing this week now. And you'll also find all the links that Jeanette's talked about. You'll find them over there. So thank you so much, Jeanette, and goodbye, everybody. Go out there and make stuff happen. Bye.